storm had been merciless, tearing through the Montana wilderness with winds that bent century-old pines like saplings. Marcus Thompson adjusted his prosthetic leg as he surveyed the damage from his cabin porch. The metal and carbon fiber mechanism still foreign after 3 years. His German shepherd, Ranger, sat alert beside him, ears twitching at every sound the forest made as it settled from the tempest's fury. The dog's amber eyes held an intelligence that Marcus had come to rely on more than any human companion. Since returning from overseas, Ranger had been his anchor through the darkest nights, when phantom pain shot through his missing limb, and memories of distant battles invaded his sleep. The cabin, inherited from his grandfather, had become their sanctuary in these remote mountains, where the nearest neighbor lived 15 miles down a winding dirt road. Marcus had chosen this isolation deliberately, seeking peace among the towering peaks and endless wilderness that his grandfather had loved. But as he watched Ranger's hackles rise slightly, something felt different about this morning's stillness. The destruction was extensive, but not unusual for these mountain storms. Fallen trees blocked the access road, their massive trunks creating natural barriers that would take days to clear. Marcus had prepared for such isolation, stocking enough supplies to last weeks without contact with the outside world. His grandfather's journals had taught him to read the mountain's moods, to anticipate nature's violence and plan accordingly. The solar panels had survived, providing power to his modest needs, and the well pump continued its steady rhythm despite the storm's assault. But Ranger remained restless, pacing the porch with purposeful steps that Marcus recognized as the dog's warning behavior. During their military service together, this same alertness had saved their unit countless times in hostile territory. The shepherd's ability to detect danger exceeded any technology the military possessed, reading subtle changes in air pressure, scent, and sound that human senses missed entirely. Marcus trusted this instinct more than his own eyes, having learned through experience that Ranger's warnings were never false alarms. Something was moving through their mountain sanctuary, something that didn't belong. The first sign came at noon when Ranger suddenly bolted toward the tree line, his powerful legs carrying him through the debris field with practiced ease. Marcus grabbed his walking stick and followed, his prosthetic navigating the uneven terrain with careful precision. The dog stopped beside a massive oak that had been uprooted by the storm, its root system exposing a cavity in the earth that hadn't seen daylight in decades. Ranger began digging frantically, his claws scraping against something metallic buried beneath years of accumulated soil and leaves. Marcus knelt beside his companion, brushing away dirt to reveal the corner of a weathered metal box, its surface green with age and corrosion. The container bore military markings that made Marcus's blood run cold, symbols he recognized from classified operations that were supposed to remain buried forever. His grandfather had been a military man too, serving during conflicts that were rarely discussed in family gatherings. But this discovery suggested secrets that ran deeper than wartime service, connections that had somehow led to this remote mountain hideaway. Inside the box, wrapped in deteriorating oilcloth, Marcus found documents that made his hands tremble. Maps of the surrounding wilderness marked with coordinates and coded notations filled the container, along with photographs of men in military uniforms he didn't recognize. But it was the letter bearing his grandfather's handwriting that stopped his breath entirely. The message was addressed to him specifically, written in the careful script he remembered from childhood birthday cards and Christmas greetings. The words spoke of dangerous men who would come looking for what was hidden in these mountains, of a responsibility passed down through generations of Thompson men who had served their country in ways that could never be acknowledged publicly. His grandfather had been part of a covert operation during the Cold War, protecting assets and secrets in remote locations across the American wilderness. The letter warned that those secrets had enemies, people who would kill to possess what was buried in these mountains, and that Ranger's bloodline had been bred specifically to guard these hidden treasures. The dog's exceptional abilities were not accidental, but the result of generations of selective breeding for intelligence, loyalty, and protective instincts. The sound of approaching vehicles shattered the forest's peace, echoing off the mountain faces like thunder from a clear sky. Ranger's ears snapped forward, his body tensing into the combat stance Marcus remembered from their deployment days together. Through the trees, Marcus could see dust clouds rising from the valley road. Too much dust for a single vehicle making its way through storm debris. Someone had cleared the fallen trees with heavy equipment, working through the night to reach his isolated cabin. The approaching convoy meant business, and their timing suggested they had been monitoring his property, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike when communication with the outside world would be impossible. Marcus felt the familiar weight of his service pistol against his ribs, a comfort he had maintained even in retirement. But against multiple attackers in unfamiliar vehicles, his best advantage would be Ranger's superior senses and the terrain his grandfather had taught him to navigate. The letter had mentioned cache locations throughout the wilderness, supplies and weapons hidden for exactly this scenario. His grandfather had prepared for a war that was only now reaching its conclusion, and Marcus found himself thrust into a battle he never knew existed. 3 black SUVs emerged from the forest, their windows tinted dark enough to hide the occupants within. Marcus counted at least 12 figures as they deployed from the vehicles with military precision, their movements coordinated and professional. These were not amateur treasure hunters or curious government agents, but trained operators with serious funding and unlimited resources. The leader emerged last, a tall man with silver hair and a face that Marcus recognized from the photographs in the buried box. Vincent Kowalski had been his grandfather's commanding officer during those classified operations, but the years had hardened him into something cold and predatory. His presence confirmed Marcus's worst fears about the document's authenticity and the danger they represented. Kowalski had spent decades hunting for the secrets his grandfather had hidden, using his position in various government agencies to track down leads and eliminate threats. The recent storm had provided the perfect cover for his final assault on the Thompson family legacy, confident that no witnesses would survive to report his presence in these remote mountains. Kowalski's voice carried across the clearing with the authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed without question. He demanded that Marcus surrender the documents and reveal the location of additional caches hidden throughout the wilderness. The conversation revealed decades of betrayal and murder, confirming that Marcus's grandfather had died under suspicious circumstances to protect these secrets from falling into the wrong hands. Kowalski had been selling classified information to foreign governments, using his knowledge of hidden assets to fund a network of traders embedded throughout the intelligence community. The documents Marcus had discovered contained evidence of these transactions, proof that could expose the entire conspiracy and bring down dozens of corrupt officials. But Kowalski had no intention of leaving witnesses alive, planning to eliminate Marcus and claim the caches for himself before disappearing into a new identity prepared years in advance. His operatives spread out through the forest, cutting off escape routes and preparing for a systematic search of the property. The chase began when Ranger suddenly launched himself at the nearest operative, his 100 pounds of muscle and bone driving the man to the ground with devastating force. The surprise attack created the distraction Marcus needed to retreat toward the cabin. Grabbing the emergency pack, his grandfather had insisted he keep ready at all times. Gunfire erupted behind him as Kowalski's men regrouped, their shots splintering trees and shattering windows as Marcus dove for cover. Ranger rejoined him at the cabin's back door, blood on his muzzle, but his eyes bright with combat alertness. Together, they plunged into the forest, following game trails that Marcus had explored countless times during his recovery from injury. The familiar paths took on new significance now, each turn and landmark potentially offering concealment or advantage over their pursuers. Behind them, Kowalski's angry shouting echoed through the trees as he realized his prey had escaped the initial trap. The real hunt was about to begin in terrain that favored those who understood its secrets, and Marcus found himself grateful for every painful hour he had spent learning to navigate these mountains on his prosthetic leg. The deeper forest offered temporary sanctuary, but Marcus knew their pursuers would follow with tracking equipment and superior numbers. Ranger led the way along paths that seemed random but followed a logic only the dog understood, his keen senses detecting dangers and opportunities invisible to human perception. They reached a rocky outcropping where Marcus consulted his grandfather's map, matching coded symbols to landmarks that had seemed merely decorative during childhood visits. The first cache was located beneath a pile of stones, arranged in a pattern that appeared natural, but followed geometric principles. Inside the hidden compartment, Marcus found military-grade equipment that his grandfather had stockpiled decades earlier, including night vision devices, communication gear, and weapons that could level the playing field against Kowalski's superior force. More importantly, he discovered detailed maps of cave systems and defensive positions throughout the wilderness, a network of hideouts and supply points that could sustain a prolonged resistance campaign. His grandfather had prepared for exactly this scenario, anticipating that the secrets he protected would eventually draw enemies to these mountains, seeking to claim what they had failed to steal during the original operation. As darkness approached, the temperature began dropping toward freezing, and Marcus realized that Kowalski's urban-trained operatives would struggle with the mountain environment's harsh conditions. The storm had left the forest soaked and treacherous, with hidden obstacles that could cripple the unwary and streams swollen beyond their normal boundaries. Marcus and Ranger possessed crucial advantages in this terrain, their months of recovery and exploration having taught them every game trail and shelter in the surrounding wilderness. But their pursuers had thermal imaging equipment and satellite communication, resources that could overcome traditional woodcraft advantages if the chase continued into open ground. The key was drawing them deeper into the mountain's heart, where caves and rocky terrain would neutralize their technological superiority while maximizing the defensive advantages Marcus's grandfather had spent years preparing. Ranger seemed to understand the tactical situation instinctively, leading them toward higher ground, where the ancient cave system would provide both shelter and strategic positioning. The dog's military training had never truly ended, his instincts honed by years of partnership with soldiers who depended on his abilities for survival. The cave entrance was hidden behind a waterfall that had increased to dangerous levels during the storm, its roar masking their approach from electronic surveillance. Ranger plunged through the curtain of water without hesitation, trusting Marcus to follow, despite the risk of slipping on wet rocks with his prosthetic leg. Inside, the cave system opened into chambers that had been modified by his grandfather's engineering skills, with supply caches and defensive positions carved into the living rock. Emergency lighting revealed stockpiles of food, water, and ammunition that could sustain a siege for weeks, along with communication equipment capable of reaching military frequencies that Kowalski couldn't monitor or jam. Marcus realized that his grandfather had transformed this natural fortress into a command center for operations that continued long after his official retirement from service. The documents they protected weren't merely historical evidence, but active intelligence that could expose ongoing criminal conspiracies involving some of the highest levels of government and military leadership. Kowalski's desperation to recover these secrets stemmed from their potential to destroy careers and trigger prosecutions that would reach into the present day, making Marcus and Ranger the last obstacles to a cover-up decades in the making. Outside, Kowalski's operatives had discovered their trail and were approaching the waterfall with increasing caution. Their thermal imaging had detected heat signatures within the cave system, but the rocky environment distorted readings and made precise targeting impossible. Marcus watched through concealed observation ports as the enemy force split into teams, some ascending the cliff face, while others attempted to find alternate entrances to the cave network. Their professional coordination impressed him, but he noticed signs of frustration as the mountain environment challenged their urban combat training. Ranger had positioned himself at a choke point deeper in the caves, his low growl echoing off stone walls as he prepared for close-quarters combat. The dog's presence would force attackers into single-file advance through narrow passages, neutralizing their numerical advantage while maximizing the defensive benefits of the terrain. Marcus activated the emergency beacon hidden in his grandfather's equipment, sending a coded signal to contacts within the intelligence community who could provide backup if they survived long enough for help to arrive. But rescue was hours away, and Kowalski's impatience suggested he would risk everything on a direct assault, rather than wait for reinforcements that might bring unwanted official attention. The attack began with flashbang grenades that filled the cave entrance with blinding light and deafening noise, designed to disorient defenders, while assault teams advanced under cover of the confusion. But Marcus had anticipated this tactic, using his grandfather's defensive preparations to seal himself and Ranger in the deeper chambers while maintaining observation of the battle space. The narrow passages forced Kowalski's men to advance in single file, where Ranger waited in ambush with the patience of a predator born for this type of warfare. The first operative through the passage found himself facing 100 pounds of muscle and fury, the dog's attack so swift and violent that his screams echoed through the cave system like something from a nightmare. Marcus provided covering fire from concealed positions, using the rocky terrain to create crossfire zones that channeled attackers into predetermined kill zones. His grandfather's defensive planning proved brilliant in execution, turning the cave system into a maze where superior numbers became a liability rather than an advantage. Each passage offered multiple defensive positions with prepared fields of fire, forcing the enemy to clear every chamber at tremendous cost, while defenders fell back to even stronger positions. Kowalski's voice echoed through the caves as he realized his carefully planned operation was disintegrating in the face of prepared defenses and superior knowledge of the terrain. His threats and promises revealed the true scope of the conspiracy Marcus had uncovered, confirmation that dozens of officials were complicit in the decades-long cover-up. But more importantly, they revealed that Sarah Thompson, Marcus's cousin whom he had believed died in a car accident 3 years earlier, was actually being held prisoner as insurance against this exact scenario. Kowalski had been planning this operation since Marcus inherited the cabin, using Sarah as leverage while systematically eliminating other Thompson family members who might possess knowledge of the hidden caches. The revelation transformed Marcus's defensive fight into a rescue mission, adding urgency that overrode tactical caution. Ranger seemed to sense the change in their situation, his aggressive stance shifting to something even more dangerous, as protective instincts combined with combat training. The breakthrough came when thermal imaging revealed a weakness in the cave's natural defenses, a chimney leading to the surface that could allow attackers to bypass the prepared kill zones. Marcus realized they couldn't hold their position indefinitely, not with Sarah's life hanging in the balance and reinforcements potentially bringing heavier weapons that could collapse the cave system entirely. The decision to break out required splitting their forces, with Ranger creating a diversion while Marcus attempted to reach the surface through passages too narrow for pursuit. The plan relied on the dog's ability to hold multiple attackers at bay while navigating treacherous terrain that would challenge even experienced climbers. But Ranger's intelligence and training made him capable of tactical decisions that exceeded many human soldiers, his understanding of the mission objectives clear despite the inability to communicate through conventional means. As Marcus began his ascent through the chimney passage, he could hear Ranger's controlled aggression echoing through the cave system. each bark and growl precisely calculated to maintain enemy attention while concealing Marcus's escape route. The climb tested every adaptation Marcus had made to function with his prosthetic leg, the narrow passage demanding precise balance and strength that pushed his physical limits to their breaking point. Handholds carved by countless years of water erosion provided purchase for his ascent, but the smooth rock offered little margin for error with his artificial limb. Below, the sounds of combat intensified as Kowalski's operatives pressed their attack against Rangers' defensive positions. Their progress measured in yards gained at tremendous cost. Marcus reached the surface as dawn broke over the mountains, revealing the full scope of Kowalski's operation through equipment scattered around their base camp. Satellite dishes and communication arrays suggested coordination with forces beyond those present in the immediate area, confirmation that this conspiracy reached levels that could mobilize significant resources. But more importantly, Marcus spotted the armored vehicle where Sarah was being held, guarded by operatives who had remained topside while their colleagues assaulted the cave system. Her presence so close to the action confirmed Kowalski's arrogance and desperation, his confidence that superior numbers would quickly overwhelm any resistance Marcus and Ranger could offer. The rescue attempt required Marcus to cross open ground, while his companion continued fighting in the caves below, their partnership temporarily broken by tactical necessity. But Ranger's distraction had drawn most of Kowalski's force underground, leaving only 3 guards watching Sarah's prison. Marcus used terrain features and equipment positioned by the enemy force to approach undetected, his military training asserting itself despite years of civilian life. The guards were focused on the cave entrance, where explosions and gunfire indicated their colleagues were facing heavier resistance than anticipated. Their attention divided between watching their prisoner and monitoring the underground battle. Marcus reached the vehicle and discovered Sarah unconscious but alive, her condition suggesting drugs rather than injury as the cause of her unresponsiveness. Her survival confirmed that Kowalski needed living witnesses to reveal cache locations, insurance that had ultimately provided the leverage Marcus needed to mount a rescue operation. But time was running short, as radio chatter indicated that reinforcements were en route, additional operatives who could tip the tactical balance decisively against the isolated defenders. Sarah's revival took precious minutes as the drugs cleared her system, her consciousness returning in stages that revealed the full horror of her captivity. Kowalski had been using psychological torture and drug-induced interrogation sessions to extract information about family secrets and cache locations throughout the wilderness. Her knowledge proved limited, but her survival had depended on convincing her captors that she possessed crucial information about her grandfather's operations. The reunion was brief but emotional, confirming that family bonds had survived years of separation and deception. Sarah's intelligence training, revealed for the first time during their escape, added tactical capabilities that Marcus hadn't anticipated in his rescue planning. She had been working undercover to investigate the same conspiracy that had claimed their grandfather's life, her apparent death staged to provide cover for operations against Kowalski's network. Together, they possessed the complete picture of the conspiracy and the evidence needed to expose it, making their survival crucial not just for personal reasons, but for national security implications that reached the highest levels of government and military leadership. The escape route led through terrain that tested both their physical capabilities and their ability to function as a team despite years of separation. Marcus's prosthetic leg struggled with the rough ground, while Sarah fought the lingering effects of drugs that affected her balance and coordination. Behind them, the sounds of combat from the cave system had changed character, suggesting that Ranger was being forced to fall back through his prepared defensive positions. The dog's tactical withdrawal was buying them time to reach safety, but each minute increased the risk that their companion would be overwhelmed by superior numbers and firepower. Sarah's knowledge of the surrounding area proved invaluable, her intelligence work having required detailed familiarity with terrain features that could provide concealment from aerial surveillance. Together, they moved through forest paths that offered cover while maintaining speed toward a predetermined rally point where help would be waiting. But Marcus's concern for Ranger weighed heavily on his mind. The bond forged through combat and recovery, making it impossible to abandon his companion despite tactical necessity. The sound of approaching helicopters changed everything, their distinctive rotor signatures indicating military rather than civilian aircraft responding to Marcus's emergency beacon. But Sarah's intelligence training allowed her to distinguish between friendly and hostile aircraft, her knowledge of operational procedures revealing that some of the approaching forces belonged to Kowalski's network, rather than legitimate rescue operations. The conspiracy's reach into military aviation suggested resources and coordination that exceeded even Marcus's worst fears about the enemy's capabilities. They needed to reach the rally point quickly, while avoiding open areas where helicopter-mounted weapons could engage them effectively. Sarah led them through terrain features that provided overhead cover, her route selection demonstrating tactical knowledge that impressed Marcus despite his own military experience. But the approaching aircraft meant that Ranger was facing not just ground assault, but potential air support, odds that would challenge even the most capable defender. The decision to return for their companion carried enormous risk, but neither Marcus nor Sarah could abandon the dog who had already sacrificed so much to protect them. The cave entrance had become a battlefield, where smoke and debris marked the intensity of the fighting within. Marcus and Sarah approached from an alternate route that Sarah's intelligence work had revealed, using natural camouflage to avoid detection by aircraft circling overhead. Inside, they found Ranger holding a defensive position in the deepest chamber, wounded but still fighting with the determination that had made him legendary among military working dogs. Bodies of Kowalski's operatives marked the passages where the dog had made his stand, testament to skills that exceeded human capabilities in close-quarters combat. But ammunition was running low, and Ranger's injuries were slowing his movements despite his refusal to retreat further. The reunion was emotional but brief, their combined presence in the cave system, creating opportunities for coordinated defense that had been impossible when fighting separately. Sarah's intelligence training included combat skills that complemented Marcus's military experience, while Ranger's tactical instincts provided early warning of enemy movements that human senses couldn't detect. Together, they represented a formidable defensive force, despite being outnumbered and outgunned by enemies with superior resources and support. Kowalski's personal appearance in the cave system marked his desperation to recover the evidence before official rescue forces could arrive and compromise his entire operation. His presence confirmed the document's importance and his willingness to risk everything on this final gambit to protect his conspiracy from exposure. The confrontation was personal rather than tactical, decades of betrayal and murder crystallizing into direct combat between enemies who understood exactly what was at stake. Kowalski had been responsible for Marcus's grandfather's death, Sarah's kidnapping, and countless other crimes committed to protect his network of traitors from justice. But his arrogance had led him into terrain where his advantages disappeared, facing opponents who fought for family honor rather than money or power. Marcus felt the weight of generations as he faced his grandfather's former commander, understanding that this battle would determine whether decades of sacrifice and preparation had been worthwhile. Ranger positioned himself to protect Sarah while engaging targets that threatened their flanks, his tactical awareness allowing him to function as both combatant and early warning system for threats beyond human perception. The final battle tested every skill Marcus had learned during his military service and recovery from injury, his prosthetic leg functioning under stress that exceeded any previous experience. Kowalski's desperation made him dangerous despite his age, his knowledge of Marcus's limitations, allowing him to exploit mobility disadvantages created by the artificial limb. But years of adaptation had taught Marcus to turn perceived weaknesses into tactical advantages, using his prosthetics capabilities in ways that surprised enemies who expected conventional limitations. Sarah's combat skills proved exceptional, her intelligence training having included advanced firearms and hand-to-hand combat techniques that rivaled Marcus's military experience. But it was Ranger who turned the tide of battle, his final charge breaking Kowalski's defensive position at the moment when ammunition was nearly exhausted and defeat seemed inevitable. The dog's sacrifice embodied the loyalty and courage that had defined military working dogs throughout history, his actions ensuring that justice would finally be served despite the tremendous cost in blood and pain. The sight of Ranger falling, wounded but victorious beside Kowalski's lifeless body, crystallized everything Marcus had learned about courage, sacrifice, and the bonds that transcended species barriers. The arrival of legitimate rescue forces marked the end of a conspiracy that had lasted decades, their investigation revealing the full scope of Kowalski's network throughout government and military institutions. Marcus and Sarah's survival ensured that evidence would be preserved and justice served, but the cost had been enormous for all involved. Ranger's injuries required immediate medical attention that tested the limits of military veterinary capabilities, his survival uncertain despite the best available care. The dog's condition became a symbol of the sacrifices required to preserve freedom and justice against enemies who operated from within trusted institutions. Marcus remained by his companion's side throughout the medical procedures, their bond having deepened through shared combat into something that transcended normal human-animal relationships. Sarah's recovery revealed her true role as an intelligence operative whose disappearance had been staged to investigate the conspiracy that had claimed their grandfather's life. Her work had prepared the groundwork for exposing Kowalski's network, but success had required the evidence that only Marcus could provide from his grandfather's hidden caches. Together, they possessed the complete picture needed to bring down dozens of corrupt officials and restore integrity to institutions that had been compromised by decades of betrayal and greed. The family reunion was bittersweet, marked by grief for their grandfather's death and joy at Sarah's survival, but overshadowed by concern for Ranger's uncertain prognosis. The dog had become the symbol of their family's commitment to service and sacrifice, his actions embodying values that had guided Thompson men through generations of military service in both acknowledged and classified operations that protected national security at enormous personal cost. The weeks that followed brought Ranger's gradual recovery and the satisfaction of watching Kowalski's network face justice in courts and military tribunals that had been decades in the making. Marcus found purpose in testifying about his grandfather's service and the conspiracy that had tried to pervert it into personal gain rather than national security. The experience of combat alongside family members had healed wounds that went deeper than his physical injuries, restoring connections that had been severed by years of isolation and recovery from trauma. Sarah's decision to remain in the mountains while continuing her intelligence work created the family unit that Marcus had thought lost forever, while Ranger's presence ensured that their grandfather's legacy would continue protecting the secrets and values he had died defending. The cabin became a gathering place for family members and fellow veterans who understood the bonds forged through service and sacrifice, a community that honored the past, while building toward a future worthy of those who had paid the ultimate price for freedom and justice. Today, Marcus often sits on the same porch where this story began, watching Ranger patrol the forest paths with renewed purpose despite the scars that mark their shared battles. The dog's intelligence and loyalty had been tested in ways that exceeded any training program, his actions proving that the bonds between human and animal partners could overcome any obstacle when united by common purpose and mutual trust. Sarah's visits bring news of ongoing operations against the remaining members of Kowalski's network, confirmation that their grandfather's sacrifice had not been in vain, but had ultimately protected the institutions he served from corruption and betrayal. The mountains remain a sanctuary, where healing continues through the simple rhythms of daily life, but they also stand ready to defend the values and secrets that require protection from those who would exploit them for personal gain rather than national service. Ranger's legacy extends beyond his individual heroism to represent the countless military working dogs whose service often goes unrecognized, despite sacrifices that equal or exceed those of their human partners. The story of their partnership demonstrates that loyalty, courage, and intelligence transcend species barriers when united by training, trust, and shared commitment to protecting others from harm. Veterans like Marcus find healing through these relationships that bridge the gap between military service and civilian life, providing purpose and connection that helps overcome the isolation and trauma that too often define the post-service experience. If you're listening to this story, please share your thoughts about where you heard it, and tell us about the loyal companion who has stood by your side through difficult times. These bonds between humans and animals represent some of the purest examples of courage and devotion in our world, reminding us that heroism comes in many forms and that loyalty knows no boundaries when it comes to protecting those we love. Subscribe to support our mission of honoring these stories and ensuring they reach others who need inspiration and hope during their own battles. Thank you to all veterans and their families who continue serving our communities long after their official duties have ended, and to the four-legged heroes whose courage and dedication help heal the wounds that wars leave behind. Your service reminds us that freedom is never free, and that the bonds forged in service create families that transcend blood relations, to include all who understand the meaning of sacrifice, loyalty, and love.